Hey gang, Trevor here with Breaking Muscle. This week we are talking about the hip. This is the strongest area of the human body and how we translate as CrossFit coaches, as lifting coaches, and as athletic coaches. We have to translate a lot of movements into hip open to hip closed or hip closed to hip open. So let's talk about those. The easiest examples that we have to give in real sport are from going to hip open to hip closed. If you ever watch someone spike a volleyball, you see that big arch position that they get themselves in, you'll notice that my hip is open. The faster I can close that angle down, the harder I'm going to hit the ball. Same thing in CrossFit, you notice on the kipping pull-up, we'll have a big open hip, and then we close that down, and that movement is what gets us upward into the pull-up position. Now we go from hip open, hip closed to hip closed to hip open. A couple really good examples. The basic one is anything you have to jump for. Volleyball, basketball, any sport that my hip is closed, and now I have to open it up to get in the air. We also think, if any of you watch football, of a lineman who's down in a closed position and then has to come up and inside. Same thing in wrestling. If I've got a partner and I've got him around the waist in a closed hip position, and I throw him over my shoulder, I've got to open my hips to do so. Specifically now, let's look at the ground game. Let's look at BJJ and where the hip open and hip closed comes into play. So I got Jeff here. He's going to hop on my guard. And I'm going to go from a position where I have an open hip. So I've tried to keep him at bay perhaps. And he's going to now start to throw strikes. So I have to close this angle down by pulling him in and closing down that hip. So now I'm hip closed. Now if I want to start striking, I've got to open that up before I can start hitting and doing whatnot. So again, open hip, closed hip, you should be able to see really, really clearly here. Now what if I'm closed and I need to go open? Let's say I've got Jeff, boom, in an arm bar, and I've wrapped my arms up, and now I'm hip closed, but in order to get this going, I've got to open it up. So I'm going to take my hips from closed to open. Hopefully you'll be able to see now a little bit of the translation between closed hip, open hip, and open hip, closed hip. So when you're doing movements such as the deadlift, a clean, or a pull, you'll see that that's opening your hip. And movements like the GHD sit-up and the kipping pull-up to close your hip. Think about these when you're working out. Think about it when you're on the mat, and see if you can't translate from sport to sport. We'll see you next week. Thank you.